Welcome to TheoTrade. This is Don Kaufman. Here we are. It's August 28th, 2017, doing the Theo Night video. There's about 40 minutes left in the trading day, but in today's video, well, I'm not going to update you that much in the S&Ps. Listen, they're down about 2 points right now. We are just off the 2438 level. Now, for those of you that do watch videos on a day-to-day basis over here, we've been talking about the 2438 level pretty much ad nauseum. One of the things I want you to think about in some of the coming trading days, if we do crack below the 2438, we're wide open for right around 2411. And again, I'll show that on a little bit of a broader time horizon over here, rather than looking just simply at the, again, intraday chart. Here we happen to be looking at 30-day 1 hour. And again, I want to exemplify this. It's the 30-day 1 hour. And you can ultimately see some of the price action over the most recent 30 days. That 2411 would obviously come into scope if we're solidly below the 2438. But again, that's not really going to be my focus today. One of my focuses today needs to be what's going on specifically inside of the XLF, the financials. As we know, the financials have driven a tremendous amount of the trades specific to the S&P 500 as of late. Okay, if you start to zoom in, you'll see the financials sell off fairly hard. They've bounced, sell off fairly hard. They bounced, and it looks like we're in the midst of another down move. Now, what's interesting about this, when you start looking at the financials, and all I did is I just clicked to a year-to-date percentage, and I want to be clear about the different time frames here. So again, that's a year-to-date, changed everything over to a percentage view. I wanted you to see the financials where they are year-to-date. They're up just shy of about 5%. So how does that really relate to the marketplace? Well, the financials are up about 5%. Again, feel like they're in a pretty hefty little downtrend. I guess if you're into technicals, it could be a head and shoulders out there. I'm not into that stuff, right? So the financials are selling off. The S&P, look at the spiders. The spiders are up about 8.5%. And then ultimately what do you have is the Nasdaq, and the Nasdaq's up about 19%. So you've got the Nasdaq that's appreciated substantially. The S&Ps are caught in the middle, right? And the financials are weak on a relative basis. Last, but definitely not least, I think you need to pull up the IWM sometime, which is barely up on the year. It's about 1%, okay? But I'm going to move away from that. And again, I think that in the coming days, you should absolutely keep your eyes on the financials. The financials continue to slide from this level. And let's give you a specific level. Cracking under 2450. That's only about 13 cents away, but cracking under 2450, okay, could see some strong sell side activity for the S&P 500. Specifically, if the financials really start to crack under 2450, that would leave the door open for the S&P futures to cruise right down to 2411. Okay, let's completely change the topic of conversation. I'm going to bring up, okay, an underlying over here, and I want everybody to kind of take a look at this with me. All right, before I start to get into detail of what this is, just look at the chart, okay? What do I have here? Well, I found something that is absolutely exploding to the upside. This is not being brought up because I want you to get bullish on something and or bearish on something. I want you to realize what this is and what you happen to be looking at. It's the XLU, which happens to be the ETF for the utility sector. Now, again, bear with me as I display this because it's shocking when you start to pull up a year-to-date percentage chart, which I've ultimately just done. Utilities year-to-date are up 14%. You know, I've been looking at this for the last few weeks, and I've been watching it really since this last kind of ascension, if you will, when it was up ultimately 5%, because quite frankly, I was even shocked when it was up 5% year-to-date. This last move to the upside over here, what is going on in utilities? Are they like reinventing electricity out there? And you really have to think about this, because what are some of the holdings that make up, you know, the utilities? But forget about all of that. We'll come back to some of the holdings in just a moment. Why is trade diving into the utilities like it's going out of style? Okay. There's only two things that really strike me in utilities, and you should really start to think about this stuff. There's only two things that really strike me. Okay. What are they? Well, for the most part, you could either be buying this for dividends, right? So you could be out there and you could be buying the XLU because you want the dividend. The dividend right now, and again, I'll highlight it on the screen. The dividend's paying about, 3.17, just rounded to 3.2%. So there's the dividend, okay? Are traders and investors diving in there because they want that dividend? Like, oh yeah, I got to make me some 3%. I mean, I find that a difficult argument. And the reason I find that it's a difficult argument is because how many other underlyings are paying more than like 3%? I mean, you can go out there, you can buy something like Ford. Now, granted, Ford's down almost 14, 15% year to date. But if it's just pure dividends, well, I mean, come on, Ford's paying almost a 5.6% dividend. So it's tough for me to fathom that the entire trading world is diving into the XLU because of the dividend. Well, there's really only one other reason. What are they doing? They're diving in here simply because they're trying to be risk averse. I mean, these are the only reasons I can really fathom. And you start looking at this again for what it is. This search for yield is obviously on, but in the shortest duration over here, since July, this thing is exploding to the upside. And again, this is not the latest, greatest technology. There's no valuation that you're going to tell me is relevant to be able to buy utilities at this point. Like, people are always making value. Oh, it's Tesla and it's going to be worth $1 gazillion. Really? Are the utilities going to be worth $1 gazillion in the future? Because the utilities have been around ultimately forever. And when you start looking at some of the holdings in here, again, this is an ETF. You look at some of the holdings, all right? NE, which is Nextera Energy. This thing is exploding to the upside. Again, you look at it in a year to date, well, one of the primary holdings, this accounts for about 10% of the XLU. It's up almost 27% year to date. You start looking at some of the other holdings of this, okay? Duck. And I'm not suggesting that anybody buy any of this, okay? The point of me displaying some of the holdings over here is for you to start to rationalize, okay, how dangerous the marketplace happens to be. When trade is going out, throw caution to the wind, please. There's no caution anymore. They're throwing money into every place, every way, shape, or form. And when you start to think about relative valuations, let's talk for a minute about Facebook. There is no value that you can assign to underlyings at this point in time. There's no, when I say relative valuations, like, what is Facebook really worth? Is it worth 20 times earnings, 100 times earnings over here? How can you assign a value, okay, when the marketplace will go out there and just throw capital at even products that have no chance of really having that kind of appreciation in something like the utilities? This is just a little bit of food for thought moving forward, because you start to realize, again, how much risk is really in a marketplace when everybody on the street, again, it's beyond throwing caution to the wind at this point. Again, remember the financials. If the financials crack below 24.50, I think 24.11 is wide open. And have a look for yourself at these other asset classes, things like utilities, that seem to not make sense right now, and recognize that, again, how fragile these markets happen to be. Thanks everybody for joining us here at TheoTrade. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.